Council meeting for this Wednesday, the 24th of June. It's 6 o'clock, so we will get started. First of all, we acknowledge the Whadjuk people as the traditional owners of the greater Fremantle-Wallulip area, and we recognize that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still important today. And I also acknowledge that we meet here today on land that was never ceded, and I wholeheartedly support the many campaigns for truth-telling, justice, and reconciliation here and across this country. So for anyone who may not have attended a meeting before, or folks that are online, just to let everybody know that this meeting is being recorded and streamed live online. So while all care is taken to maintain privacy, visitors in the public gallery and members of the public submitting a question may be captured in the recording. So with that, I don't see any apologies for attendance or leave of absence. So applications for leave of absence, are there any from the elected members? Nope, seeing none. We'll go on to disclosures of interest. Any disclosures of interest for tonight's agenda? All right, seeing none. Responses to previous public questions taken on notice. So the agenda itself contains responses to the questions that were taken on notice at the last ordinary council meeting. So those can be found online, and if you have any difficulty finding those, just let us know. Which now brings us to public question time. So during public question time, members of the public are allowed to speak for up to 3 minutes or ask questions for up to 3 minutes. And when that time hits, you'll hear a little alarm. And if you haven't wrapped up your comments or questions, we just ask that you do so as quickly as you can, because we do have a fair number of people that are here to speak this evening. So does that make sense to everybody? Great, thank you so much. So we'll start with the items that are not on the agenda. And for those, we have Leilani Williams. Great, thanks, Leilani.
Good evening, Mr Mayor, councillors and officers. Thanks for the opportunity to speak tonight, and many thanks to Councillor Williamson-Wong, Councillor Moughlin and Courtney Aston for answering so many of my questions recently. People tell me I ask quite a lot. We're really lucky to have community engagement in Fremantle. It's a really excellent service provided by the city. Is there an opportunity to better align and synchronise community feedback? The processes appear quite convoluted with several parties involved, and there must be significant hidden costs to the ratepayer. Options 1 and 2 for the South Terrace, Marine Terrace and Jura Road roundabout were the options preferred by city officers, main roads and road safety audit. Option 3 was then selected because it was considered closest to community preference. I can't see quite clearly how the evidence supports that. Roundabout specific feedback is mixed with wider South Fremantle feedback. Town teams engaged around 60 people on the roundabout itself. MySay, the interactive maps and the 900 strong petition also reflect views and ask for crossings across a much larger area. Is the engagement report interactive map data? In the engagement report, the interactive map data represents only 15% of feedback, but it is valuable data and some of the only location-specific data that we actually have. 7 map entries on the interactive maps, only out of 35, identify the roundabout as a concern. This represents less than 3% of the 240 formal MySay submissions. These 7 maps identically pinpoint 9 locations. I haven't used the map, so I don't know if the pinpoints kind of snap into place when you hover on the map. But if there's no snap lock feature, then 7 identical maps just appears a little odd. My first question is, before relying on interactive map data as evidence, does the city assess it for duplicate or repeat participation, common addresses, businesses, or email accounts of a similar name? Of the 7 identical maps, most had South Terrace addresses, which was worth noting. They all identify the east as where people cross the roundabout. Pedestrian counts this year record the east with 40% more pedestrian activity than the west. If desire lines are the route people take most naturally and frequently, why is pedestrian traffic being shifted from naturally occurring eastern desire lines to the lesser used west? Is this wise when we have only had 1 pedestrian minor crash at the roundabout over the last 5 years, a figure I stand corrected on? Does changing desire lines create unforeseen safety risks? Why is the west being described as the pedestrian desire line when the available data is indicative otherwise? In future, I'd love to see town teams and MySay surveys become better aligned so that data can be consistently compared and grouped and quantified. I think it will stop a lot of headaches and it could save the city a lot of money. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Leilani. And I'll just also note that this is still open for public comment, I think for another week or so people can also provide their feedback online. But for the questions, I might turn that over to the director to answer.
Thank you, through the chair. I would comment initially that consultation is still open to the 30th, and part of that process is your feedback, so thank you for that. And we'll endeavour to receive that feedback and interpret it and provide a follow-up report to council with recommendations. In terms of my say, the interactive mapping for us is used as a fact-finding tool and data collection support, and informs the consultation process. In terms of our online surveys, officers will flag where multiple entries are observed with similar names and email addresses, and that will be considered during the development of the reporting. Your question 2, in terms of the desire lines, I think I've perhaps answered this prior in an email, but the city's not seeking to shift pedestrian movements or pedestrian routes. While the pedestrian surveys have recorded higher crossing volumes on the eastern leg of the roundabout, the movements were reasonably balanced, and the proposal to include formal pedestrian crossing facility must consider a range of other factors as well, and these include traffic volumes, vehicle movement, sight distances, accessibility, cycling, bus movements, and compliance with main roads data as well. The eastern side of the roundabout carries higher volumes of traffic and presents a number of operational and geometric constraints, which makes that location for a pedestrian crossing more problematic and more challenging. As a result of that, the preferred location, if a crossing is to go in, is on the western leg, and that's why that has been identified on the balance of all those engineering considerations. I think you jumped to question 3. In terms of safety risks, any proposed change to pedestrian crossing locations is assessed to ensure that it does not introduce unacceptable safety risks. So as a part of our design process, pedestrian movements, vehicle movements, sight distances, accessibilities and requirements are all considered. The intent of the project is not to create new conflict point, but rather to consider the location and try and achieve the most appropriate balance, thinking about safety, accessibility and compliance. The proposal has been through a thorough review by an independent road safety analysis expert, and also been reviewed by the engineering design team as well. I think you just answered those 3. Your notes that came through this afternoon also talked about the desire lines for a preferred crossing location. I think they were all covered in your second question, so I'll probably leave it there. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Next, we have Brennan Verrier, for item not on the agenda.
Good evening, everyone. I really appreciate you guys giving me the chance to speak tonight. I'm a Perth local fella. I grew up in Freo pretty much my whole life. I played footy here for the South Fremantle Footy Club. I've run a business here in personal training, and I'm currently working in O'Connor as well. So Freo's obviously big fills my heart up, and I love this place so much. So, but yeah, I guess with the trees at South Beach, I feel like when you drive through into the area, it's just like this unbelievable postcard image, and it really sets a great natural environment for the community and Freo to really sink into the natural environments that this place has, especially around South Beach, because it's so beautiful. And if we rip those trees down, it could be a bit of a concrete jungle the more we continue kind of these things, because I do my job at the moment, I work for Tarkine Athletics, and we as trail runners, we like to raise awareness around the impact of deforestation around the country. Tarkine is a forest in Tasmania, and we're donating some funds to the Bob Brown Foundation to make an impact, and we're doing a lot of good work at the Jarrahdale Forest as well. And I've noticed, like, I do a lot of trail running at the Jarrahdale Forest out there, and obviously there's a mining dilemma out there as well. And I've just noticed, like, recently there's been a lot of black-tailed cockatoos flying into suburban areas as well, I've noticed. And if we just keep ripping, like, some big giant trees from the areas, is that going to impact these birds locally as well? So I just think it's very important to just really stay conscious about the decisions we make, those environmental decisions surrounding those trees, and if it's going to affect the red-tailed cockatoos. So my question here is, has the city assessed the full environment value of these trees, including their potential contribution to the black-tailed cockatoos' habitat and food sources, and how long it would take for replacement plantings to provide the same benefits? Thank you.
Thank you. I might turn that over to the director for a reply.
Thank you. Through the chair, no environmental assessment has been carried out on those Norfolk trees. We'd obviously be reluctant to remove any trees, and we'd acknowledge that all trees provide amenity, environmental and habitat benefits. If it is deemed necessary for the purpose of creating a crossing, our parks team would aim to replant with endemic and native species where appropriate to try and minimise the impact, but it will take time to mitigate that impact. It's accepted.
Great, thank you. And just the city is also bound by the same tree retention policy that landowners are as well. So the replacement trees would have to be able to grow to a similar size as well. Wonderful. Next, Haley Parker.
Hi everyone, my name's Hayley. I'm a mum of 3 and a resident of South Fremantle. I've brought my son Ted here today to witness democracy in action. And I'm here to tell you a story. I'm sure you have a big pack full of lots of boring stuff, and this is a family story about South Fremantle. There's a street in Beaconsfield that was named after my great-great-grandfather, Ted Lewington. He was honoured in Fremantle's own historical records for planting hundreds, perhaps thousands of trees across Perth in the late 1800s, early 1900s, including the Norfolk Island pines down at Rockingham Beach, which still stand here today. His sons lived opposite each other on Douro Road, just 2 doors down from today's South Beach Cycles, which is 12 Douro Road. And just outside their doors, from about 1900, just outside their doors, 2 Norfolk Island pine saplings had just been planted. Ted Jr., his business was to drive people on horse and cart down South Terrace before the tram was placed there and well before the motor car came into Fremantle. My grandfather, the great South Fremantle football legend Clive Lewington, was born on that street and across the road from those trees. His mum would have pushed him past those 2 trees in an old pram down to the beach. And when my mum grew up in the 1950s, my grandfather would have pushed her past those trees by foot because they only had one family car. And now I live in South Fremantle with my 3 children, and I push my own baby and my 2 older kids past those trees, and I tell them stories about my great-great-grandfather Lewington. These trees are 118 years old. They predate the car. They have survived 2 world wars and the Great Depression and even Y2K. Ted Lewington Sr. may have even planted these trees, and if he didn't, he would certainly have tended to them. When he was laid to rest, the records show in 1929 the wake was held on Douro Road, and those trees would have been there to witness the community gather in his honour. Now, Main Roads and Fremantle Council are proposing to remove these trees for pedestrian safety. I have 2 questions about this proposal. I'm not a greenie, but I do think that this is an amenity we all enjoy. Given these 118-year-old Norfolk Island pines predate the motor car, why do these trees not qualify for heritage value under the council's own register of significant trees? And my second question is on the independently commissioned Shawmac safety report. The recommendation was to remove trees that impact the sight distance at the pedestrian crossing. Given this report fails to evidence that the trunk of these trees do indeed block the sight lines, I'm wondering when that process will occur. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, and thanks to your great-granddad for planting those trees, because we all know the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago, and the second best time is today. But I might turn that over to the director if there is a response to any of those questions.
Thank you, through the chair. Initially, in respect to the significant tree register, that's actually a planning policy, and it relates to trees on lots of land, private land. And as we mentioned earlier, trees situated in the road reserve are actually managed in accordance with the city's trees on managed or owned land policy. And where we do unfortunately have to affect those, we will endeavour to replace them at least 2 to 1. In terms of the road safety assessment, the independent assessment did include a sightline survey, and a subsequent one was also carried out by the city's design engineers as well. To be fair, it is pretty clear that the trunks of the Norfolk Island pines do obscure sightlines, and we're pretty confident that we would have to address that risk given the parameters that main roads will define in respect to sightlines. It's pretty clear. Thank you.
All right, now we've got a whole bunch of folks here to speak about item 10, which is the dog policy and local law update. So we'll start with John Waite. Great. Thank you, John.
Good day. Thanks, Mayor and councillors. I'm John Waite. I want to speak to the dog policy. I'm not a dog owner, but I do look after and walk dogs for friends for free. And I'm on the Facebook Dog Beach group admin. Now, I have to acknowledge the difficulty for council of providing a policy in this area, because basically you have people who love dogs and regard them as part of the community, and then you have people who are very concerned about dogs and very uncomfortable with them, and trying to find that balance is never going to be easy. But there's a process that happens in government where people believe there's a problem and propose a restriction, and I think that's happening here. And invariably the costs of that restriction are not obvious. Let me just say I'm really glad that the proposal in the draft to have a 5 metre clearance around playgrounds, I'm so glad that was dropped, because I have a little park area with a children's playground outside my house. It's a little community gathering centre. People come with their dogs. The dogs go in the play area. The kids go in the play area. The adults sit around and talk. It's a great little community centre. And that policy, that part of the policy, the 5 metre exclusion, would just have been nuts. And the response to that would not have been to exclude dogs. It would have been that everybody there would have ignored the policy, and eventually somebody who was concerned about dogs would come along and get in touch with the rangers, and there'd just be conflict. It would be an absolute waste of resources. So thank you for dropping that. I'm disappointed that it got into the draft policy in the first place. Samson Park. Now, I go to Samson Park most days. I don't have a dog, but I walk dogs. I walk all over the park, in the bush areas, with dogs, off leash. It's not meant to be that way. I'm one of many, many people who do that. In fact, my experience is that the vast majority of people who use Sampson Park are dog walkers. I know that the policy says that we're the second most common people. I don't believe that's correct. I am there regularly, and I love it. And I love when there's no fence and you're actually part of the bush. You're there in the bush. The dog can go and sniff here and sniff there. It has its, what they call a sniffari. And it's just great. It's just part of a wonderful life. And I also go in the area that is proposed to be prohibited because it's a, what's the word? It's a conservation area. And it's got some wonderful parts in it, but it's also at great risk of being absolutely overrun by fumitory weed. While I'm walking the dog, I'll stop and pull out some of the fumitory. I can't do it all, but I try and help.
That's great. John, if you could wrap up your comments, because we have quite a few people to speak tonight.
Okay, so I'm disappointed that there is this proposal to block that area, make it restricted, and I don't believe it will be helpful, and I believe people will ignore it, and it will just lead to conflict. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, John. And yes, Sampson Park is a beautiful, beautiful space. Next, Mark Woodcock on the same item.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to ask some questions. I'm not sure about the 5 metre being taken out. I thought it was still in, so I've made a comment on it, and I'll read it anyway. I'm speaking to register my strongest possible opposition to the proposed amendments to the Fremantle dog exercise areas and the tightening of local dog laws. Under the guise of streamlining public spaces, Council is implementing a policy that amounts to a direct attack on the very members of the community who need their animals the most: our seniors, our vulnerable, and our local families. Fremantle has a distinctly ageing demographic, with more than 26% of the community is aged for 60 years or older, and the ABS data reveals that lone person households make up almost 33% of all households in our city. Behind these cold statistics are thousands of local seniors, widowers, who have long lost their partners and rely entirely on companion animals as critical lifeline connections, which forces them to ask whether the council has actually taken any professional, medical or psychological advice on how stripping away areas where seniors have limited access to general dog walking areas and off-lead spaces, and how this will directly impact mental health, fear, chronic isolation amongst our elderly and people who are suffering stress issues. Furthermore, the policy represents another attack on the modern Australian family by implementing a blanket dog ban on the 5 metres of every single play space, effectively outlawing the traditional family dog walk and forcing one parent or child to stand outside the trap line, segregating the rest of the family while parts of the family play. This dynamic raises the serious question of whether specific data-backed evidence the council possesses to prove that fracturing the family unit and banning pets from all of the mentioned areas makes a playground a better place or safer. Given the responsible families use the shared park for visits to teach their children boundaries, socialisation, responsibility and community care. The deep hypocrisy of the policy is glaringly obvious to everyday ratepayers who know that the truly irresponsible owners, including some ex-councillors who constantly walk their dogs without leads, would ever follow any of the rules. They will continue to evade penalties. Instead, it's the law-abiding families and vulnerable seniors on fixed incomes who has reflected on the reality that by increasing restrictions and doubling fines, they are actively adding to Fremantle's threat for housing stress and other mental issues that people face in our community daily. Fremantle used to pride itself on being an inclusive, passionate and progressive city, but there is nothing compassionate about a policy that penalises family, isolates the lonely and risks driving the vulnerable into financial struggles. while letting well-connected rule breakers off the hook. I urge the council to scrap all of the rigid amendments and focus on a common sense, behaviour-based management that supports Fremantle families, community lifelines, and the society we should be. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. And I will just reiterate that the proposal before us tonight has removed the 5-meter rule and the play spaces as well from the policy. So just in case people were wondering about that. Next, we have Steve Cook for the same item. Great, Steve. And when you hear the alarm go off, Steve, that means 3 minutes is up. We just ask that you wrap your comments up as quickly as you can. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name's Steve. I've been living in North Fremantle for 2-3 years now, and I do some curation work at the Fremantle Mosman Park Cricket Club. And so my concern really mostly is about the dog poo left on the ground all the time. Look, it's no, sometimes there's like 30 lots of poo that we have to pick up. And just bearing in mind that the children from North Fremantle Primary, they have a lot of activities there. They use our clubhouse. And of course we have the cricket and the football. So we've got the ball rolling around, the football, the cricket ball rolling around in this stuff. Dog poo is classified as quite dangerous. So, you know, you can pick up a parasite. You know, I understand the thing with mental health with animals and cats and dogs, and I've had cats and dogs for most of my life. But the behaviour at the park is really not that good. And I would say that probably 20% of the people that go down there don't do the right thing. Don't see the dog poo because they're looking the other way or didn't want to see it. And also, I was going down there one day to curate the ground, and there was a fellow with his 2 children and his dog in the play area, and shut the gate. The dog was a sentry, it barked, they wouldn't let me in. So, and he said, I'll go and use the other gate round that side, you know. And I thought, well, that's not. And all I asked him to do was put his dog in the lead, and he wouldn't do it. So, I'm just proposing some better regulation. Did I just hear that the 5-metre rule had been not adopted? Yeah, okay. But it's an overall thing anyway. So yeah, that's my concern, and maybe you know, there could be bigger fines for people that don't do the right thing and leave their dog poo on the ground. So that's mainly the one. In general, you know, the behaviour of the dogs is all right. It's only the owners really with the dogs that are the problem. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Steve. Next is Charlie Nicholson for the same item. Great, thank you, Charlie.
Your Worship, the Mayor, councillors, staff, thank you for letting me in here again. 2 previous speakers have covered what was both going to be a question and a point to make about the fact that this policy appears to be mainly just based on administrative concerns and does not appear to have any professional dog-human exercise relationship expertise behind it that recognises the critical importance of the family pet, the family hound, to so many families and, as pointed out, so many lonely old people. So I think it really needs a good working over to deal with those issues and to consult with the people who use these places with their dogs and find a way to make sure that they're operated properly and that people who are scared of dogs actually get the opportunity to learn something about them and become familiar with them. Because as we get more and more civilised and artificially intelligent, we get further and further away from, you know, the fundamental business of living in the environment with animals. So I want to go directly to the question of Prawn Bay. Now, the Prawn Bay wetland has been a difficult issue. We've fought for years to get that area managed properly, but somehow or other it has got onto the council, into the council's head that this is a priority conservation area. And I can tell you from 40 years experience walking along there and 25 years in the EPA dealing with land clearing, with wetlands, with all sorts of those sorts of issues, that the Prawn Bay wetland itself, yes, it has some samphire that has colonised it, and that is interesting. Dogs never go into it. It is old dredge spoil, which we spent a lot of time rehabilitating in terms of planting it up with trees and shrubbery and so forth. It's had a bit of management with a bit of fencing to keep people out, but they hadn't kept the weeds out, so it's actually a bit of a shambles along there. And then, of course, there's all the erosion, which is caused by very bad coastal engineering along there with all the rock work and so on. So, but it is actually a prime habitat for what the experts call hang on, I have to read it.
That's okay. Oh, Charlie, the 3 minutes just timer went off. So if you could
oh,
just
right.
wrap up your comments.
Okay.
it's
So just the point that enrichment behaviour. So it's not just a case of humans needing enrichment, having dogs, but the dogs need enrichment in their own right. So they go home happy, having explored, having sniffed, having clambered over the rocks and the tree trunks and everything else, and they're happy for the rest of the day, and they don't have to go and bark at the postie. So there are benefits to be had all round by going back into this stuff and getting proper advice on these sorts of issues to maintain the importance of these animals in people's lives.
Great. Thank you, Charlie. Next we have Jim. Great.
Good evening, Mr Mayor and councillors. My name is Dr Jim Cody. I'm a South Fremantle resident and ratepayer, been where I am in South Fremantle probably for about 20 plus years. Look, I agree with everything that's been said tonight, and there's some good points, and I can see the complexity of your situation, but ranging from the responsibility of dog owners, but also removing conflict by trying to minimise the amount of regulation, and particularly for the poor old rangers that try and administer this, often in my view, with a strong degree of recognition of the situation that they've actually walked into and using their discretion around fines versus warning. So I want to acknowledge that. Specifically, however, tonight, and you will have all received a letter from me a little earlier, hopefully, I want to talk about an officer recommendation in the agenda papers tonight that seeks council endorsement that the Mills and Wares Park remain a dog on leash area. Many of you may not have been on council, but in November 2024, the council received a petition signed by more than 180 local residents requesting that the park be designated an off-leash exercise area. And at the time, the council decided, in light of the review that's now just been completed, can they slip this into behind it? We accepted that at the time. 18 months down, however, the review has now been completed, and it included a community survey about the current and future use of Mills and Wares Park, which is great. While tonight's papers indicate a future report will be provided to council regarding the enhancement possibilities of the park, tonight's agenda does seek council endorsement for a recommendation that the park remain an on-leash area. It's unclear the reasons underpinning this recommendation, which are provided as its size, it's small, and that alternative dog exercise areas are in the local environment. Now, they are up to 1 kilometre plus away. And it's difficult to see how those 2 points, out of the fact that there are a range of items identified through the dog review, exercise review park, and the petition and the local community survey, have been used to inform the position made by the officers. Hence, my question is, if the review identified important themes that include public and child safety, big tick, balanced access to public space, big tick, responsibility of dog ownership, big tick, along with an awareness of public demand for additional exercise areas and concerns about unnecessary regulations affecting dog access for their owners, how these themes have been incorporated into the decision that's been applied for you to endorse tonight, just on size and accessibility of other areas. None of it seems to be there. So for context, for those of you that don't know, the Mills and Wares Park is a small neighbourhood park that functions primarily as a local community space rather than a destination recreation area. It's already well supported by council services, has good visibility, limited access points, no children's play infrastructure resulting in a relatively low competing use. While it supports a range of passive recreation areas, its biggest use is as an informal dog exercise area with concurrent social interactions between local residents. Many of the users of this park describe that this pattern of use has been going on for 30 years since the park was created. And at that point, they're all breaking the local council rules by having their dogs off leash. For many residents, particularly older people, all those with older dogs, its value lies in being a walkable neighbourhood space that supports local connection and community life. This importance is reflected in the strongly supported petition of 18 months ago that remains true today. So in the interest of transparency and public accountability, if the council is not able or comfortable to support the community's request, I ask that it defer the endorsement of the officer recommendations at the Mills and Wares Park until outcomes of the specific community review are known and some explanation of how we're going to progress this matter moving forward in the short term are addressed.
Great. Thank you, Jim. Okay, next same item is Christopher Wilson. Did I get that right? Can everyone hear the first timer when it goes off out there? Okay, just making sure. So when the first timer goes off, it's a little quieter.
We can all hear it.
You can't hear it? Okay, good. That's the 3-minute timer. So if you haven't wrapped up your comments, or that's that you.
Hope you haven't started mine yet.
No, we have not. Great. I just was just making sure because I can hear it here, but it's kind of quiet. All right. Well, thank you, Christopher.
So I haven't come with anything prepared. I wasn't planning on even coming, but I wanted to come and say what I had to say. As people have mentioned, there's a lot of elderly people. Part of the reason why I bought in North Freo was Prawn Bay, where I could take my dog. The other option is Rule Street. It's up hills, it's crossroads, it's over a kilometre away, and that's not feasible for elderly people. There's got to be other ways that you can do it along Prawn Bay, where you can have your conservation and your dogs. To do with the dog poo, maybe people need better training, maybe the council needs to give a discount on rates to train people how to look after dogs better. Because most of the issues with dogs come down to the owners, not to the dogs themselves. If they're aggressive, if they're not trained, if they're leaving the shit behind, that's the owner, not the dog. And it's very disappointing that it's come to the point where the council's looking at taking away Prawn Bay because it's such a beautiful area, lots of dogs catch up, very social, and it'll be very disappointing to see if that goes away.
Thank you, Christopher. And next, let's say Samantha to speak on the same item. Great, thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm a nervous speaker and this is the first time. So as a resident of North Fremantle, I have come to address obviously the council and respectfully urge you to give careful consideration to the views of the Fremantle community when determining the proposed local dog law. While the local governments must balance a range of competing interests, community consultation is only meaningful if the views expressed by residents are genuinely considered and reflected in decision making. Where consultation demonstrates a clear and overwhelming community position, elected members should be cautious about proceeding with measures that directly contradict the sentiment unless there is compelling evidence-based justification for doing so. Of particular concern is the proposed removal of Prawn Bay as an off-lead dog exercise area. The consultation results indicate that only 12% of respondents supported the proposal. Therefore, I can only assume that 88% of respondents did not support the removal of off-lead access to Prawn Bay. Such a result is not marginal or divided. It represents an overwhelming rejection of the proposal by those who took the time to participate in the consultation process. Despite this, the rationale provided by the city appears to be limited to broad references to environmental reasons. To date, no detailed evidence, impact assessments, or clear justification has been publicly presented that would enable the community to understand why such a significant change is necessary, particularly in the face of overwhelming opposition. The absence of a transparent and evidence-based explanation raises an important question. If a proposal opposed by 88% of respondents proceeds regardless, what practical value does community consultation actually hold? Prawn Bay is not simply a dog exercise area. It is a well-used community space where residents exercise, socialise and connect with one another. For many dog owners, particularly older residents and those who rely on nearby off-lead areas for daily exercise and companionship, the loss of access will have a real and tangible impact on their quality of life. The proposal risks unnecessarily reducing one of the few coastal spaces where dogs and their owners can enjoy responsible off-lead recreation. As elected representatives, you have been entrusted to make decisions in the best interests of the community. This responsibility extends beyond consideration of officer recommendations and requires independent judgment regarding whether a proposal is justified and supported by evidence. I therefore respectfully ask that each elected member carefully review the consultation outcomes before casting their vote and give genuine weight to the views expressed by the community. In relation to Prawn Bay specifically, I ask that you consider whether there is sufficient evidence to justify overriding the clearly expressed wishes of the overwhelming majority of respondents. At its heart, this decision is about more than a dog exercise area. It is about public confidence in local government, faith in consultation process, and whether residents can reasonably expect their voice will be heard when they participate in civic decision making. I urge you to listen to the North Fremantle community, carefully scrutinise the justification for the proposed changes and vote against the removal of Prawn Bay as an off-lead dog exercise area. We as a community overall voted no to the removal of Prawn Bay, and as a community we believe we are not being fairly heard. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Samantha. Now, is there anyone else in the public gallery that would wish to speak during public question time? No? All right, well, then we'll move on with the agenda. Next up are petitions. I'm not aware of any. Are there any petitions to be received? No. Deputations, we have none. The presentations, likewise. Now, the confirmation of minutes from the 10th of June. Can I ask someone to move the confirmation minutes? Councillor Slaughter, seconded by Councillor Clark. All those in favor? That's carried unanimously. Is there elected member communication tonight? No? Let's see, none. Reports and recommendations from officers. Here we go. No planning reports, so we'll move right into the general reports, and that will start with the review and amendment of the dog exercise and prohibited areas council policy and the local laws. We've got a number of amendments, but if I could ask someone to move the officer's recommendation. Let's move the officer's recommendation, somebody? Councillor Moughlin, seconded by Councillor Sullivan. Great. Did you wish to open debate, Councillor Moughlin? Great. So we have a number of amendments as well, and then the item is before us.
I'm happy to move some amendments without speaking on the main item first.
That's great. Councillor Sullivan, which amendment did you wish to move? And
I just wonder if the council would like me to move them individually, or we could do A, D, and E together, I guess, because they're considered administrative.
okay, so you're moving the first amendment that you in the first one that
Yes,
said,
on page 3 of the amendments.
Okay. Is there a seconder for Councillor Moughlin?
D, and E.
Great. Well, we can always vote on it in parts, but we'll just move it.
Okay, I can move the whole lot, and we can
Great.
always vote.
If people
on
want to
parts.
vote on
Yep.
parts, we can absolutely do that. Great. So that's been moved and seconded. So Councillor Sullivan.
Yeah, so obviously A is just administrative. Is all I was changing was the bona fide, not the bona fide. The B is essentially, again, I consider it fairly largely administrative. It's just I found the wording a little bit unclear, but I also wanted to make sure that we weren't actually saying that you had a right to take your dog into unenclosed outdoor alfresco area, sort of an automatic as of right, the right only would really exist where the owner or operator of that area basically was agreeing to that opportunity. That was the intent. It just didn't necessarily read that way. C, basically, when I went through it, I did identify a couple of situations, particularly at the Fremantle Oval, where we have a public car park that people go to, park their car, get out of their car, come into town. They're not really using the area for anything other than parking. And as it stood, technically, if they arrived with their dog and walked through that car park and went outside of the area, they were still technically in breach. The other one was the situation that we have at both South Beach and at Leighton Beach, where we have the ability for dogs to be sort of walking and their owners to be walking very close to nearby the public restrooms, but without the ability to go to those restrooms without sort of leaving their dog somewhere else, which means they're not really in control of their dog. What this is just doing is saying, look, you know, you can walk your dog to the door of the restroom and don't take your dog into the restroom. Tie your dog up at the restroom door and utilise those facilities. So again, common sense would have prevailed anyway, but it's just making those things clear. The next one was really trying to just help with the definition of the playgrounds. I was concerned that it wasn't fulsome enough. If we're going to do it, it needs to be clear and so there's not any ambiguity. So I wanted to make sure that we help define that playgrounds were places where there is actual equipment or objects intended for children's play, and included in that the nature play playgrounds. There are some playgrounds in Fremantle that are, for example, next to Clancy's, which are genuine playgrounds. And if that park happened to be, well, it doesn't matter whether it's dog on leash or not, that really those sorts of parks, playgrounds, also need to be included in the definition. And again, it's just trying to avoid ambiguity. The E really was just trying to make sure that we've dealt with fulsomely the assistance dogs changes, so going from the old definition to the new definition and making sure that we're not just sort of saying assistance dogs are only relevant to people who might be blind or vision impaired, because we now know that assistant dogs are used for all sorts of important medical and mental health reasons. And that's all of them. And I'm happy to, if there's anyone that anyone wants to pull out and have moved separately, I guess now is your chance.
Great, thank you, Councillor Sullivan. Any further discussion on the amendment that's before us? Okay, well, did you want to close on the amendment as well? Just checking. Great, then we'll put the amendment that's before us up for a vote in its entirety. All those in favor? That's carried unanimously. Great. So now we're back to the item as amended.
Because on page 7 there is another amendment as well, which is one of mine. So if I can move that one.
You certainly can. Is there a seconder? Councillor Williamson Wong. Okay, you wish to speak to the amendment.
Yeah, thank you. Essentially, I guess my input through this process has been fairly focused on trying to get us to a place where responsible dog ownership was more the focus, and that we as a council and a city would do our part in that process of both encouraging responsible dog ownership, but also dealing with compliance of dog ownership. Now, because that's a fairly extensive area in its own right. We don't have a paper. We don't have an officer recommendation as to how we would do that better. So essentially, what I had discussed with the CEO is, if over the next 6 months or so, we can look at whether what our performance has been in the past in terms of encouraging responsible dog ownership, but also whether or not we as a council want to see somewhat of a change in the way in which we administer compliance matters. And I don't mean that just always with the stick, but also with the carrot, because compliance is absolutely carrot and stick. There was a period of time before we had community safety rangers, where rangers were the old-fashioned kind of rangers, if I could call them that. They probably spent a fair bit more time in the parks, particularly the dog beaches and the like, and they actually spent a fair bit of time liaising with dog owners and talking about what they saw, and particularly having a friendly chat, if you like, to people that they thought weren't doing a great job with their dogs, and encouraging them to do more, and perhaps even communicating to them what options might be available out there in the community to train your dog better, or to be more responsible. Now, I think that's a conversation that we should have. One of the reasons why I'm largely supportive of what we've got in front of us tonight is that until we get that part of it right, the compliance and the education and the responsible dog ownership right, then I don't think we can sort of kind of take the gloves off. Leave the gloves on probably. But I don't think we can just assume that 100% of dog owners in Fremantle are going to suddenly start doing the right thing when we know that that's not currently the case. And we know that there are many situations where people have had, significant run-ins with dogs and their dog owners, and that there are people that are genuinely arguing that we need to control dog activity a lot more than it's currently is. So we get it from both sides. I actually believe that the process of compliance and education is potentially a more important area than the thing that we're actually dealing with right now, in terms of local laws and policy. And so that's why I'm asking the CEO to come back to us with a second phase. So hopefully we can all support that.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. Councillor Van Dorsen.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Sullivan, for this amendment. I strongly support this amendment and agree with everything Councillor Sullivan's said. I actually think the compliance and education is more important than some of what's being proposed tonight in the amended policy. I definitely want to see this. We heard tonight about the issues of dog poo on the oval. It is probably one of the top three things I hear about as a councillor is complaints about dog owners, and that's from dogs barking without control, a lot of when they're off-lead in on-lead areas, and it goes on. So I would strongly support this. I'd like to see perhaps, at Gil Fraser, some signage that actually compliant signage that tells them there's a fine associated with not picking up dog poo, that kind of thing, so that people are more aware, because I think people just pretend or, they just look the other way. So thank you, Councillor Sullivan. I'll definitely be supporting this one.
Councillor Slaughter. Thank you, Councillor Van Dorsen.
Thank you. I have a few questions on this one. In the officer's report, it refers to ongoing education and awareness initiatives from the city. So my question is, and as well as that, it refers to existing operational signage and infrastructure budgets that will be used to improve signage and dog infrastructure. And I would like to ask what what budget is that, and how are we actually doing promoting responsible dog ownership now through education and awareness initiatives as referred to in the report?
Thank you. Through the chair, in regards to the signage, we have parks operating budgets that deal with park infrastructure. Most of the signage does occur, I guess, in parks. And so as part of that, we do our general signage maintenance, but we'd also update signage where we needed to in line with any changes that come out of this process. And we've also revised the signage strategy, I guess, around how we sign parks in terms of dog rules. So we're going to a traffic light system, essentially, of green, orange, red. So it's a bit more clear for the community. And we can also pick up fines and infringements and things like that as part of that process.
Through the chair, in the past, education has been through a multitude of facets, like holding dog days in certain parks for residents to come out and those sorts of things. I would expect once this law and policy is put in place, we'll do the same. But it's also about just having the community safety staff out and about during peak periods, basically in the mornings and the afternoons, providing things like vet clinics and all those sorts of things that just attract people in for a minute, where we can chat to them and talk to them about dog behaviour and animal control and all those sorts of things. So it'll actually require a collaboration of a few different areas. So Ryan's team certainly making sure we get the signage right, community safety out there, comms team making sure we're getting messaging out on a regular basis.
Councillor Mufflin.
Thank you. Yeah, I fully support the amendment as well, or the proposed amendment rather. And yeah, for me, in thinking about this item as a whole, the idea in regards to dog ownership is that it's very much a privilege to be able to own a dog. And as part of that privilege, you have a responsibility to manage your dog and how in which that interacts with other people, how it interacts with the environment. And I would love for us to be able to say, you know, sometime down the track from us bringing in this particular change, that we see a difference and a step change, if you like, in the behaviour of dog owners and dogs in the city of Fremantle, such that we do have a more harmonious relationship between dogs and the community, more so in general. So yeah, really support this the proposed amendment.
Any further comment on the proposed amendment? Seeing none, we'll wish to close. No, we'll put the amendment up for a vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Great. So now we have a report before us, amended twice now. Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you. I'll make my broader comments now, if I may. The ones that I did want to speak about, Prawn Bay as an example. I know it's a man-made environmental area, but there are many of those in Fremantle where we've done a lot of rehabilitation, and that rehabilitation work has to go on and on. There's always more that needs to be done in many of these parks, whether they're Boo Park, whether it's Hollis Park at South Beach, whether it's the sand dunes at the beach, sorry. And as someone that's sort of, you know, been in those areas, I remember being horrified in Hollis Park that literally as we were putting in the plants and putting the bags around them, dogs were just constantly flying through and knocking those bags over and basically destroying the work that we had only literally just done. And when people talk about, well, those areas are degraded and they're full of weeds and those sort of things, well, they're degraded and full of weeds because we haven't necessarily been able to get those environments back to a sort of sustainable a place for those plants. Now, I don't think every area that's got native planting and everything needs to be a dog on leash or a dog prohibited area. But I do think we also have to give due recognition to the fact that uncontrolled activity of running through bushland areas does have a significant impact on that fragile environment, and whether it's the plants or the bobtails or the birds that get chased or whatever, depending on which park you're in, it does have an impact. And, you know, we do have to try and strike that right balance. So unfortunately, if, you know, in a dream world, every owner would have recall capacity over their dog and would be able to make sure that it didn't go into the areas that were particularly fragile and the like. But that's just not where we're at yet in terms of responsible dog ownership. Even though that is required by law, it simply isn't evident in the vast majority of dogs. And that's not, it's not been overly critical on dog owners, because I think most dog owners and their dogs are pretty passive and don't have much of an impact. But if you, in those sort of more sensitive environments, when a dog, you know, suddenly sees a bobtail lizard and decides it wants to munch on it, if you can't recall the dog in that moment, then it shouldn't be in that location in the first place. So I do strongly believe that the environmental areas do need protection. But then I read the information about Prawn Bay, for example, and I went back into the map and thought about it a little bit more, and knowing that you know, the oval is taken out of for dog use at a lot of times, particularly at times when people are finishing work and wanting to go and walk their dog, is also the time when those ovals are getting used for training and the like. So I did wonder whether Sorrel Park at the between the bridges at the North Bank area should also be a dog exercise area. Now that hasn't been tested. I think we sort of had a bit of a conversation. I don't know whether we should or shouldn't move it tonight, but I would like to see at least some further consultation on the possibility of having Sorrel Park sort of either trialled or considered as a dog exercise area. There are a lot of people who are living in apartments or small houses in that North Bank development, and they literally, to get to a dog park, have to go through Prawn Bay anyway. So it might be, you know, more sensible to have Sorrel Park used that way. There's not, I mean, I know the map says there's playground there, but other than the basketball under the bridge, I'm not absolutely sure what's actually there. But we don't need to resolve that tonight. But I just wanted to flag that possibility, and if one of the other councillors wants to move it as a minor amendment, then I know the staff have looked at it. The other one was the Mills and Wares Park, and it does kind of like feel a little bit like, well, we said at the time of the petition, well, we should really wait until we're looking at the dog review, and we're here at that moment. And of course, in the interim, we've started a community consultation process about the future of the park as well. So we're sort of, you know, keep coming up with more work that's happening in that part. Now, I support the officer's recommendation in the sense that they have proposed an assessment criteria for whether or not parks should be used for dog exercise, dog off-leash areas, and they have particularly said where there are small parks, perhaps those parks are too small to be used that way. That's the criteria. I don't want to, from day one, basically go, yeah, but in my neighbourhood, I'd like to break the criteria because, you know, a number of people nearby me think it's a good idea. Because then what's the point of having the policy and the criteria in the first place? But having said that, there are always going to be exceptions to the rule, and we do need to be a little bit flexible. But at this point in time, I have to say that until such time as we get that park working well in terms of the provision of access to the residents that actually use the park for their primary front door, until we get that right, and until we get the configuration of that park right, I'm not really prepared to go back in and review it being a dog off-leash kind of area. The staff have suggested that maybe it's one of these ones where, like the Esplanade Reserve, maybe there is a sort of a way of kind of having a dog off leash for a portion of the day. The one at the Esplanade works really well. It's early in the morning. It's, I think, 5 a.m. to 8 a.m. Before other users are typically using it. I think the same would be true for some of the smaller parks as well. Would be happy to trial that, but not yet at this stage until we actually see the feedback from the consultation on the overall park, and then deal with it then. The last thing I wanted to say is, yes, we're doing comprehensive review. We've got a new, proposed new dog law and a proposed new version of a policy. But of course, we review those things pretty well all the time. And yeah, okay, we don't want to pass everything and then start the review again. But the ability to make different decisions down the track is always there. In fact, the very last thing I will say is we are constrained in the city of Fremantle with the amount of open space that we have. We know that. It's not necessarily perfect in every area. There are areas that are already short of having little neighbourhood parks and the like. And so I think we have to acknowledge that in a perfect world, I would love to see, if we had some new parks coming on stream, I would love to see opportunities where a park is actually dedicated primarily for dogs and dog owners, and could include play equipment and the like. But we don't have that yet. We don't have the space. We don't have the luxury of a lot of space to start doing that. Even though we know dogs have become more and more important in the family situation and in society, as has been clearly explained tonight. So I would love to be able to do that, and maybe there are opportunities as we go forward. We certainly should be looking for those, but they're not going to be in every suburb or in every locality. We have to do the best with what we've got, and that means having a balanced approach, and I think that's where we're at.
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. Councillor Van Dorsen.
Thank you, Mayor Lover. Yeah, I'll just speak to the item as a whole, just to start with. So I think this has been an interesting one for community consultation, a lot of feedback. Interesting too, from the community feedback was 75% dog owners, but a lot of the amendments had a real share of views. There was no real clear support or not support. There was sort of almost 30% split on some of the proposed amendments, which was kind of interesting. So I don't know if that suggests we're doing it right and representing the community views. And yeah, I think it's, I guess when there's strong positions either way, it's easier to make decisions. So this one's tricky on some parts. I guess so generally support the amended policy and local law as proposed, except for 3 parts really, which relate to North Fremantle. So I'll just focus my speaking on those and move the amendment, and which hopefully would be supported by other councillors tonight. So part of the amendments in the policy is changes to the prohibited areas and the dog exercise areas, which includes excluding Rocky Bay Reserve, so removing that from the list.
So you're moving your amendment, Councillor Van Dorsen?
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay.
I can move the amendment first. I was just going to speak.
If you,
okay. All right.
Is there
Sorry,
a seconder for the amendment? Councillor Clark. Okay, now we're on the amendment that's before us.
Right.
Great, no
Apologies, I
worries.
thought I could speak to it generally because it was proposed within the policy. Anyway, it's fine. Thank you. Rocky Bay Reserve, so that being proposed to be removed from the dog exercise areas, and then another one with Prawn Bay proposed to be excluded from the North Fremantle foreshore exercise area, which we've had a few presentations on Prawn Bay tonight. So I don't support restricting or making these prohibited areas or dog on lead areas. I think one of the, I guess speaking to Prawn Bay to start, it's part of the North Fremantle Foreshore Reserve, and you're actually you're creating a little section. So there's a dog which extends, I think it's from the south end of Stirling Bridge up to one of the residential property on the other end of Gil Fraser Oval. And by making the Prawn Bay area prohibited, you're making people put dogs on lead for 100 metres, and then, you know, it's like they can have it off on. So I think it's a bit of a compliance nightmare. I think it creates confusion. I don't think people will comply with it. But regardless, I do appreciate the intent of officers, and my understanding is the reasons these are being proposed to be prohibited is due to them being nature reserves and being more, so it's more consistent across the city. And on a high level, that sounds very reasonable. But I just think when you know the area and see the way they're used, and as mentioned tonight by one of the presenters, to my mind, there's no, and I did ask the question of officers as well, there's no complaints about dog behaviour in those particular areas, both Rocky Bay Reserve, and I'm talking about sort of that cliff top walk, and then the Prawn Bay area, like there's no complaints, there's no issues I'm aware of. Through Prawn Bay, it's quite a dedicated path. While it's Prawn Bay and conservation, it is, we can argue the toss about the environmental value and what we're protecting and everything there, but I personally don't see dogs running amok through there. There's quite a clear path, and there's boardwalks going over the, you know, the water way and everything, and it's really just a thoroughfare. So I'm not seeing environmental damage or anything. Councillor Sullivan talked about new planting and bags around and seeing, you know, maybe dogs will destroy that. It was quite established there already, so I don't see that as an issue. But I just, yeah, it just doesn't make sense to me, that particular thing. I understand nature reserves having prohibitions where they're big parks, nature reserves. You don't want dogs just running out amok where there might be birds or, you know, flora and fauna and that sort of thing. But I'm not seeing that. If you know Prawn Bay, it's not that environment. It's a small section, creating confusion, like just making a small section prohibited between a long foreshore off-lead area. Yeah, and I do hear complaints already about dogs off-lead in on-lead areas. You're just going to hear more about that. Very hard to enforce as well. Regard to Rocky Bay Reserve, again, I'm not seeing, it's a very narrow, for most part, it's a narrow pathway. There's no complaints, there's no identified issues, there's no evidence. I think it's a very much loved dog exercise area. It's quite a tight path. And I actually think parts of it potentially less safe for walkers if they're on a lead. Like this cliff, like there's quite precarious, some of it, you're sort of climbing up and down. I think if you've got a lead and dog pulling on you, that could actually, to me, that's, you know, potentially a safety issue. Yeah, apart from, I just don't think it is necessary. And what we have generally from the feedback is really strong voices wanting more off-lead areas, not less. And I think removing these would have a significant impact on our community and the amenity and the things, you know, the dog enjoyment, I can't remember the term Charlie used, for those areas. I think it's, you know, they are privileged in North Fremantle. They're beautiful areas, lots of places we can walk our dogs. The other one I want to speak to is not included in my amendment, but I just neglected to pick it up, but I will speak to it. It's just the inclusion of Rule Street Park, just while I'm on this, because it does relate, in the amendment. So that would be a dog off-lead, so a dog exercise area. I don't, and we did discuss it, councillors had a discussion on this, and I just think we shouldn't be taking areas away. I think the Rule Street Park as it is, I receive a lot of complaints about dog behaviour in that area, or owners not controlling their dogs in that area already, and I'm just worried about making that off lead. That's just going to exacerbate the issue, which is why I strongly supported Councillor Sullivan's amendment to have more education and things for the community, because yeah, I'm nervous about the Rule Street one, just given we've already got issues there, and now we're making it dog off lead, which I think will exacerbate. So I would like to see some more education and something done about those areas. But I was just sort of bringing that one up now because we're sort of taking away but giving back, but it doesn't really help the people at Prawn Bay to give them Rule Street. It's a long distance between. I will close there or finish speaking, I don't need to close yet, but on the amendment, so I am proposing to keep Rocky Bay Reserve and the Prawn Bay as dog exercise areas for the enjoyment of our community. Again, not seeing any evidence or reason really other than a broad proposal. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Councillor Van Dorsen. And when we get back to the item, I'm going to take it that your comments haven't been finished yet, so if you have more to say on the item as a whole. Councillor Williamson-Wong, do you have comments on the proposed amendment?
Yes. I am not going to support the amendment by Councillor Van Dorsen, but I think more broadly when we are considering this item, when I've been thinking about the dog policy, and as a decision that clearly from our community engagement has brought many people into the conversation and a big variance in views as to dog ownership and dogs in Fremantle. I do think that it's important to take a leaf out of the councillor who sat in my seat before in terms of looking back at the code of conduct that we're required to adhere to, which hasn't been done from this seat probably since I've been elected. But for as elected members, we're required to base our decisions on relevant and factually correct information and make decisions on merit in the public interest and in accordance with principles of good governance. And I think it's important when we're considering the hard decisions which we have to make as a council, that this doesn't mean we base our decisions or our debate on, I guess, other factors. And we were elected to make the hard decisions. It doesn't mean that we're going to make everybody happy all the time, but that's not our job. Our job is to weigh up the different options and then act strategically and holistically and considering all of the views. And especially with matters that gain a lot of public interest, it's not our job to bow to the loudest voices necessarily, but to take those into consideration, because our community engagement and our community consultation is a crucial part of what we consider as an elected member when making decisions, but it's not the only part of our decision making. And we need to be making sure that we are giving context to our decisions by that community engagement, but not missing out on the risk management kind of perspective of and our strategic direction that we want to go in. And I guess I make these comments because dogs are controversial and they're always going to be controversial. It's what I was told when I got elected. You know, I'm glad to have sat through a dog conversation. And I won't be supporting the Prawn Bay and the Rocky Bay Reserve amendments because I do believe that it is important for us to consider the ecological significance or the conservation significance of these areas. And that's not to say that we don't like dogs. In fact, we're just making sure that the two, I guess, user groups can have a go. And I, take the comments that Prawn Bay currently doesn't feel very ecologically significant or the like. But I would also say that having dogs in those areas is very likely prohibiting the kind of ecological or conservation values to be realised. And when you have dogs in an area, it means that, as Councillor Sullivan pointed out, you might not have plants or the like, but you also are risking plenty of animals not being able to make a habitat or feel safe in that area. And that's simply also from kind of the scent of dogs to their behaviour in that area. And I think it's important for us as a city that is restricted in our public open space, which we have for dogs, but also restricted in the areas for natural conservation and for natural areas management, that we make sure those areas are also protected. And so for those reasons, I won't be supporting the amendment this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Williamson-Wong. Councillor Clark.
Thank you. Listening to the discussion, there's a lot of different points of views on all the things around dogs, and you know, trying to get that balance to please everybody is not easy. It's very hard, especially when it's not necessarily hard. It's hard to get irresponsible owners to become responsible owners and better parents to their dogs when it comes to behaviour around kids and things like that. And when it comes to the environment, it's really interesting to have as a discussion, because in one ear I have the people who are continually working to try and green things up and make things better and stabilise grounds and improve those things. And in the other side of that, we have people who just want to exercise their dogs and run their dogs and go and be part of their community and catch up every afternoon with their neighbours. And what's been really interesting in looking at the reports is that for the report that came through for Prawn Bay, when we looked at that and the work that's to be done there, we had 48% of people saying that they wanted to see that space, that dogs should be excluded from the conservation areas, from the bush and salt marsh, 47%, sorry. But that report was 702 people. So when you look at the dogs report, we have, and we put Prawn Bay in there and say, well, what do you think about this? And we've got a different skew on the audience, but we have 4,335 people contribute to it. The majority, the vast majority are dog owners. The vast majority are people living in North Fremantle. And the support for that was only 12.9% for Prawn Bay. And the support for putting dogs on leads at Rocky Bay was only 12.8%. So it's really low to say, yeah, we should put the dogs on leads in those areas. I see both sides of that argument. Rocky Bay is similar to Cantonment Hill, and which is also in North Ward. And I know there's a battle that constantly goes on there with conservation and with the dogs. That wasn't included within this report. Sorry, being serenaded, it's distracting me. So this is one of the times that, you know, we've got to work with people who are trying to green up and people who just want to live their lives. So I feel that there is work to come next year on Prawn Bay, and I think we need to keep reviewing how we protect the natural areas and how we can keep the dogs away from them. But given that we have so few exercise areas, it does carve up those two areas where people want to walk between. I think we should allow people to just continue on those pathways and continue to walk there for now. And I think it's something we can continue to review as we go along for the natural areas to try and help them, to protect them more, and have a look at it again down the track. Yeah, I just feel it's really good to have balance, but it's hard to also get balance.
Any other comments, Councillor Sullivan, on the proposed amendment?
Yeah, look, I won't support this. People have talked about, it's too hard to, you know, have to put your dog on the lead when you go to this bit and not have your dog on the lead when you get to that bit. That's the reality of owning a dog. You know, if I want to take a dog to South Beach, it's a couple of 100 metres away, I've got to have it on the lead till I get to the beach, and then I can let it off the lead. On the way back, the opposite is true. If I'm at South Beach and I want to go to, you know, with a dog, and I want to go to the toilet, which is in the dog prohibited area, I leave the beach, and there are signs that tell me when I have to put the dog on the lead, and I have to walk on the footpath, not the grass, and I'll get there, and you work it out, right? I'm all for trying to optimize, even, maximize where we can, the spaces where we can let dogs off a lead. I get it. But as a person, like the environments in those foreshore environments, people go, oh, it's such a beautiful place, and I want to be able to go for a walk through there, and I want to be able to take my dog and let the dog off the lead. Well, those environments don't just stay beautiful by themselves. Most of those environments stay beautiful because a lot of people put a lot of hard work, whether it's the sand dunes at the beach, or whether it's the foreshore reserves, or whether it's rehabilitation of areas, and like Boo Park. And those people get incredibly upset when all that hard work is taken away, and they basically have to start again, and they have to put a huge amount of effort into protecting the things that other people just take for granted. And so there is that balancing act, and I don't think it's unreasonable to, when you leave your house and you can get to a dog exercise area, that there are areas in between your house and that area where the dog has to be on a lead. You personally still get the enjoyment of walking through that area. When no one's saying you can't walk through these areas, they're saying you need to walk through these areas with your dog on a lead. And I don't think that's unreasonable. I think that is balanced. I think going too far one way or going too far the other way is when we get the imbalance. So I won't support this amendment.
Councillor Slaughter.
Thank you. I agree with Councillor Sullivan and Councillor Williamson-Wong on this one. And I'll just hark back to what Councillor Moughlin said earlier about owning a dog being both a privilege and a responsibility. And I think that's exactly the point. If you are approaching an area that is classified as ecologically fragile, then it makes sense to put your dog on a lead. And yes, it's not a pristine environment, but it has been undergoing a lot of wetlands restoration for the last 20 years in that area. If you have a look at the Prawn Bay Ecological Restoration Project from the Swan Canning River Park.
Members of the public, we're not debating with people up here. If you can, please be quiet. No, please, there's no debate from the members of the gallery.
The City of Fremantle has been working with the Swan Canning River Park and the Department of Biodiversity, Conservation and Attractions on the Prawn Bay area for some time. And we have a report going back from 2004 when it was first recognised that the excavation of the two inlets needed to be realised to prevent erosion issues. And the work has been ongoing to ensure best practice and adaptability for a resilient and enduring project. So if you need to put your dog on lead for 100 metres to enable that, then that's what I suggest that you do. The area, I acknowledge it's not pristine, but it's a small price to pay to put your dog on a lead for 100 metres. You can still go, you can still meet up with your friends, the lonely people, the families and the seniors. We're not trying to attack your right to do that. We do want to acknowledge that sensitive environmental areas need more protection, and we are able to give them that by putting dogs on a lead. This applies in Samson Park as well. All of Samson Park is the Bush Forever site, not just a small corner, so I would prefer that dogs were on lead in the bush areas of Samson Park and off lead in the grassed middle zone. And people who walk through Samson Park regularly will see that that is not currently the case. Some people follow those regulations and some people don't. And that's where the enforcement or regulation or behaviour management needs to come into play as far as signage, as far as community safety presence to make sure that the areas that we care for and have duty to look after are looked after in the appropriate way. So I will not be supporting this amendment on that basis.
Thank you, Councillor Slaughter. And I'll just briefly say that I will be supporting this amendment, and in part because essentially what we're being asked to do is to swap two areas where dogs are off lead for another area that's up a big hill on Rural Street. And I personally just do not think that Rural Street area is ready yet to have dogs off lead. It's just a dirt field, basically. There's nothing there. So if that is where all the dogs in North Fremantle are going to go to run, it's going to remain a dirt field. And in the wintertime, it'll be muddy and full of things. It's not going to be a place that people want to go. So I personally feel that as a council, we would have some work to do if we're going to designate a new dog off-lead area to actually make it acceptable for people who are going to be having their dogs off-lead. So not all areas are equal. And while I absolutely acknowledge the need for conservation and for rehabilitation for these areas, I just don't feel like we're ready yet to actually have the Rural Street be a successful dog off-lead area. So part of what we have to do is balance up not just what's the right thing to do, but also the practical thing. Because if we're going to have to be enforcing these new prohibitions, that's going to be an interesting task for our staff and for people. So for now, I think it's personally best to leave it as it is, and we can, as a council, work towards putting some budget towards making Rural Street a great place, and then over time we can maybe transition up, but I don't feel like today is the day that we are ready for that. So I'll be supporting the amendment. Councillor Kamano.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Lorver. Yeah, look, I certainly appreciate both sides of the argument and appreciate the people who came in today to speak. On the balance, I believe that I think that I will support these amendments. If possible, perhaps we could prioritise one over the other. I think Rocky Bay is certainly one that I support. Prawn Bay, I can see the rationale behind making that a dog on lead area. However, as the mayor just indicated, with Rural Street not really up and ready to go yet, I think these are very important areas for the dog owners in North Fremantle. And yeah, from what I've heard tonight, I'll be supporting these amendments.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Kamano. Councillor Moughlin.
Sorry, just a question on this. Rural Street's been mentioned a couple of times. This proposed amendment doesn't say anything in regards to Rural Street, and Rural Street will, under the proposed policy, be a dog off lead area. Yep, sorry, it's not a question, it's a statement. So we are going to be putting dogs into those areas regardless of what happens with this amendment or not.
Any further comments or questions on the amendment? Councillor Slaughter?
I have a quick question about the wording here of keep Rocky Bay Reserve as a dog exercise area. Can you please have it confirmed that there is both the path to the beach and the beach, and one is already a dog prohibited area and the other not?
Thank you, through the chair. I think I understand what you mean. The Rocky Bay Reserve that is currently a dog exercise area is the Foreshore Reserve, which runs from Rural Street Park south to Cypress Hill. Rural Street is currently a dog on lead area, as it is. It's not actually city land, so it's Western Australian Planning Commission land, and as such we don't have any jurisdiction to define it as a dog off lead area. However, if the council decide this tonight, subject to WAPC finalising an MOU with the city, then we can define it as a dog off lead exercise area, and they've already indicated support to do that if we go that way.
I don't think that's quite my question. We have listed in our current policy the Rocky Bay Beach as a dog prohibited area, and then we're saying Rocky Bay Reserve is the road, is the track that leads to Rocky Bay Beach. So you can have your dog off lead for part of it, but if the dog gets to the beach before you, the dog's going to stop and wait for you to come put its lead on.
Rocky Bay Beach is a different area. So Rocky Bay Beach is down a set of stairs on the foreshore. Yeah.
Any other comment on the amendment? Seeing none, then Councilman
I just had a
Dorset.
question.
Oh, absolutely. You
Could
can
I
also
just,
close.
just before we close, sorry, I didn't see it in the draft policy when this policy would be reviewed, or when do you anticipate it being reviewed again once adopted? I think it said TBC, but I'm not sure. 5 years is standard?
The policies will be reviewed every second year, every 2 years.
Thank you.
Did you wish to close, Councillor Van
Just
Dorsen?
briefly, thank you. Thank you, everyone. It's obviously mixed views on this one. I appreciate both sides as well, but just having grown up there and living there and knowing the community, and importantly, I think seeing the community feedback, whilst many views were mixed on a lot of things, this one was pretty clear. There was a very small minority. Only 12.8 and 12.9% would supported this particular part of the proposal, and I think the fact that we've got multiple speakers here tonight, most of them literally around North Fremantle, I think just speaks to the, I think when you're looking at this location, there's a reason I'm proposing this. I just want to clarify, yes, the Rocky Bay Reserve, it's, my understanding it is just like the cliff top walkway, so it's not like dogs running, and then it's a cliff, and yes, there's vegetation and everything, but it's a cliff, so dogs aren't going to run down there, so it's, not seeing the impact is huge there, and that's why I propose it, and Prawn Bay similarly, it's a very small area. I hope councillors support me on this one tonight, and as it was clarified, the policy will be reviewed. I absolutely agree with what Mayor Lorver said tonight. Thank you for that. I just think more work needs to be done in North Fremantle before we make these changes. It's just sort of, I think, a bit unfair and unreasonable to, if we progress Prawn Bay improvements and what have you, maybe then we can look at it. But again, not an identified issue, so thank you.
Great. Then we'll put the proposed amendment before us up for a vote. All of those in favor? All those in favor of the proposed amendment? We have Councillor Graham, Councillor Kamada, Councillor Van Dorsen, Councillor Clark, and Mayor Lawver. All those against? Councillor Slaughter, Councillor Moughlin, Councillor Williamson Wong, and Councillor Sullivan. That amendment is carried. Great. So now we are back to the item, and seeing as we're just working through amendments, I have a proposed amendment as well. I think we'll probably just get to that, but I just want to note one thing. If you read the reasons for the amendment and what was sent through either last night or this morning, the intention of the amendment was not to remove all playgrounds. It was just to remove the playgrounds where it's an existing dog off-lead park. So staff have made a slight change to make that clear, that the intention is not to remove every playground from the definition. It's just the playgrounds that are an existing dog off-lead area, and then the rest will be the same. But if I move that amendment, is there somebody that would be willing to second it? Okay, we'll get it up on the screen first. There we go. Yep. So those are all the areas that are currently dog off-lead exercise areas, and it would exclude them from being a dog prohibited area, those playgrounds, until the parts A, B, and C are done. But if someone would be willing to second, I'd be happy to elaborate further. All right, seconded by Councillor Graham. Okay, so basically, yes, I put this forward because, as should be no surprise to a lot of people here, I have a really concerned about the fact that in existing dog off-lead exercise areas, we would create a little island of dog prohibited areas, and what that might mean for us as a council and how we might actually enforce this policy going forward. But before I get to that, I just want to talk about, again, the community feedback that we received. on the entire policy, over 77%, so over 3/4, opposed or somewhat opposed the policy that was being put forward and debated in the dog law. And the question on the prohibited areas specifically, 72.3% either said no more prohibited areas or create some prohibited areas or some on-lead areas. So again, almost 3/4 of the respondents realized that we needed a balanced approach, not a blanket prohibition across every single area. So creating a dog prohibited area, island basically, in an otherwise off-lead area is very problematic because dogs will be running around. As we know, dogs don't go on swings, but dogs also don't read signs. And so we will get to a point where in each one of these areas where there will be complaints, and the only way for us to enforce this policy would be for us to, as a council, decide that we're going to fence off those playgrounds from the rest of the park. Now, that was not something that was consulted with the community on. That was not something that people were necessarily told about. And, you know, our own report even says that, you know, because this was actually in reference to creating dog off-lead areas about fencing, is that, you know, fenced areas require careful planning, design, as well as appropriate funding, delivery, and maintenance considerations. So we're potentially having a policy where in these dog off-lead exercise areas, we're going to back ourselves into a corner of having to fence them off without actually going through all those considerations. So that is one huge thing, and I think that we owe it to our community, if that's what we're going to do, that we should talk to them about that. So, but the policy also has written, taking us down this path, would be it ignores families with dogs. I mean, just the day after we put this out for consultation, I went to my local park and there was a dad pushing his daughter on a swing in the morning while their dog was running around, and he was throwing the ball, and they were all getting along really, really great. And it was just really special to see that family there. It was mentioned tonight about the social connections that are made from people with dogs and the interactions. And that was something that I really wish that we had tried to capture when we did our community feedback, because all that we asked about were potential negative interactions. And I think if we had asked folks even an open-ended question about, has there ever been a positive interaction between yourself and a dog or a child or another person or any benefit, I think we would have been really pleased to see what those results were. But unfortunately, we did not have that. Now, we know that our blocks are getting smaller and smaller, and what came through in the community feedback was that we need more space. And it's not just for the mental health for the people that own these dogs, but also for the dogs as well. As was mentioned tonight, dogs do need to get out. I used to say when my dog, sorry, I do own a pooch, when he was a little bit of a puppy, I used to go and run the devil out of him, because if he didn't get out there and run, then he would start digging holes, he would start barking, and start being, you know, a bit of a pest in our yard. So dogs need that space as well. So if we don't have those spaces, then we're opening ourselves up to even more complaints about people having dogs. So again, so what I'm proposing is that before, in this amendment, before we include existing dog off-lead exercise areas, that we have the CEO, you know, just, or the staff come back to us and say, okay, this is how we think it might work in this specific park. We take that out to the community, and then we talk about the budget that would be required, because I can pretty much say with certainty, if we just adopt the policy as is, in these areas where dogs are running around currently, that's where we will wind up, is having to put some barriers in place to keep dogs out of the playgrounds. So, and it's not saying that we shouldn't create any more. It's not saying that we may not need more dog prohibited areas around playgrounds. It's just saying that we should do it in a very thoughtful and meaningful way. So I'll leave the opening remarks at that and just open it up for further comment. Councillor Williamson-Wong.
Thanks. Well, I made my comments clear the last time it came to us, and I don't think my position has changed since our community consultation, in that I don't think dogs should be allowed inside playgrounds with small children. Our job is not to make up hypotheticals about whether or not we might need fences. And respectfully, you may be certain that we need playgrounds to be fenced in, but I might say otherwise. There's no evidence to suggest that we need to have fences around our playgrounds, and I think it's a kind of confusing and not necessarily relevant conversation for us to be having, because the conversation should not be about whether or not we can enforce a policy, because what is more important as a preliminary question is whether or not we think that we need to have that regulation or requirement in place. And I know that my past analogy or past saying of how dogs don't need to be in swing sets has had a lot of airtime, so I hope you don't mind this next crass analogy, but we don't introduce regulation, or we wouldn't have introduced regulations for things like coercive control or other criminal matters, if we want to take it that far, if we sat around concerned about how we were going to necessarily comply or make everyone comply and go for that. We all navigate nuances in our everyday life all the time about things that we can and can't do. We're one of the most kind of regulated countries. We all know about where we have to cross at a crosswalk, hopefully, and do this and do that. I don't think that having a rule that says dogs shouldn't be inside playgrounds with small children is going to be hard for us to understand or get on board with. And actually, from the community consultation that went on, one of the biggest issues from dog owners or not dog owners was confusion about the policy. And I believe that us creating a rule that says no dogs in playgrounds creates clarity for our community so that we are all on the same page about what behaviour we can expect when we go to a park. I also think that, yes, our community engagement report came back and said that there was, a number of people who want us to make sure that some playgrounds are allowed to have dogs in them or all of them. But we can't forget that the vast majority of that community consultation are dog owners. And we also have a responsibility, as I said previously, to make sure we're considering a wider range of factors when we're making decisions. I think that, the reasons for dogs not to be in playgrounds seem obvious, but I will reiterate some of them. One of them is obviously a hygiene issue, which we saw also come through our community engagement, in the sense that, having dogs inside playgrounds and on or near playground equipment that children are, often touching, climbing over, whatever, can create serious hygiene issues in terms of if a dog decides to go to the toilet in there and there's, residue from anything, etc., etc. We can all see how the hygiene risks can pile up. And I guess the second and more concerning factor is the safety, because understandably and hopefully as a standard, we would have only well-behaved dogs in our community. But even well-trained dogs can react defensively to sudden grabbing or screaming or physical movement, and not all small children are necessarily dog-trained. And I think that it's important that the rule isn't a judgment on whether or not we think that there's good dog ownership within our community or an individual dog, but it's our responsibility as a council to be looking out for risks and managing them effectively. And we've also had multiple community members come into this chamber while I've been on council and explain to us in terrible detail about instances where their child has been in a playground and something's gone wrong with a dog that probably is a very well-mannered dog at home or in different circumstances, but something would have happened that day and they ended up in a bad situation. So I guess, dogs don't belong on swing sets or going down slides. I'm going to stand by my comment that I made last time that's had a lot of airtime because I think it's correct. The response has been, well, dogs can't read signs. Sure, dogs can't read signs. Humans can read signs. We all read them at South Beach. There's a dog section of grass. There's a non-dog section of grass. It's not fenced. We have never required there to be a fence. We all deal with the kind of nuances of making sure that if a dog does happen to run in there, the owner goes in and gets it, because there's a general understanding and, I guess, expectation that dogs shouldn't be in that area. And the dog goes back across the footpath and it's all good. I think, the argument might be, well, that's all good and well, but some playgrounds should have dogs in them. But I don't think that there's any reason that the dog needs to be inside the playground. There's not a good enough reason that it needs to be inside the playground and can't just sit on the side outside of the screaming children and the kind of chaos that might be happening in that playground to make it respond in a certain way, or the hygiene issues that, on balance, I just can't support the idea that we would have dogs inside playgrounds and on or around the play equipment when there's vast areas of grass that they can enjoy.
Thank you, Councillor Williamson Wong. Councillor Mofflin.
Thank you. Yeah, I support the policy that has come back to us, and I think it strikes a really good balance. And you know, we went out to speak to community, and in and around playgrounds, we had a 5-metre restriction imposed. And as you know, we took the feedback on from community in regards to that, and removed that as part of the changes to the policy that's in front of us today. And I think that's, you know, we've been talking tonight about striking a balance, and I think that does a really good job of doing so. I'm not going to reiterate any of the points that Councillor Williamson Wong mentioned in regards to particularly, you know, children and dogs maybe not fitting so well within playgrounds. But the point I will make is that we're talking about a dog policy tonight, where the city doesn't actually have a playground policy. And if we did consultation on a playground policy, what sort of feedback would we receive on that? And I think it would be distinctly different from dog policies. So at the moment we're asking about what dogs are allowed to do. And as I said before, dog ownership being a privilege. And I'm going to put it the other way as well, is that for children, I would actually say it's a right of children to be able to go and play in their environment unhindered by other, you know, in this instance, dogs. There are people who may have, you know, cultural reasons why they might not be particularly keen on dogs, and we also in that instance, and they just may not like dogs, and it shouldn't be expected of them just to, you know, get over it. So I think it's important for us to maintain those dog restricted areas in the policy as it stands at the moment. The premise in regards to needing to fence playgrounds, I don't agree with the premise that playgrounds must be fenced. Responsible dog ownership means that you are responsible for your dog's behaviour, and in that instance, if you can't control your dog from going into a playground, you put it on a lead and you remove it from that area. And you know, a quick, very cursory look through other local governments in Perth, many, if not most, restrict dogs from playgrounds, and many, if most, don't fence their playgrounds. Yes, there are some that are fenced, but most aren't. And the sky hasn't fallen in, and people continue to play in playgrounds and have those particular interactions. And just finally, I think if we do go down this path, it makes it particularly complex and open to lobbying for my park over your park over any other, and we as a chamber will be betwixt and between as to how we manage that. And I think for consistency's sake, we should just stick with the policy as it's put before us today.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Mofflin. Councillor Kamara.
Thank you. Yeah. Look, while I understand the intent of this amendment, I feel that the last point that Councillor Mofflin made is probably the most important, and that is in terms of it will complicate the policy in terms of being consistent across the city. And I think it's the intent of this is to try and simplify how we deal with dogs. It's a dog policy. I'm a dog owner, and I have no problems with not having my dog in a playground. I think there's plenty of opportunity to exercise my dog safely. I feel, you know, I'd be horrified if there were children in a playground that didn't feel comfortable because I wanted to have my dog in the same area. I'm really happy that the 5-metre rule has been dropped. I think that's common sense. I think people can still, responsible dog owners can still bring their dog down to an area with a playground, and they just have to manage that. That's part of owning a dog, is managing the way that you look after your dog. The education aspect is very, very important. It's going to be continuous. It's a work in progress. Unfortunately, you'd think that people who make the decision to have a dog would understand the requirements, but it's just something that is not a given. And it's important that we continue to reiterate what's important about managing your dog when other people are around. The other points that have been made about hygiene and obviously dangers that can be associated with irresponsible dog behaviour have been well made. So again, while I understand the intent, I just think that we shouldn't be going down this path.
Thank you, Councillor Kamara. Councillor Slaughter.
Thank you. I'm a bit torn on this one, to be honest, because I think there are a few parks that you've listed in that particular amendment that do pose or could potentially pose a problem. But at the same time, I'd hope that common sense would prevail and responsible dog owners would be able to be trusted to do the right thing and exclude their dogs from the playgrounds. In particular, I note there's quite a few parks on that list that have, within the green space, have separate playground spaces. So Grigg Park, for example, has a basketball court over this side and children's traditional play equipment over that side, and both areas would exclude dogs, which makes navigating the park somewhat restricted. The same with Griffiths Place Park, the same with Sampson Reserve as it progresses through its stages of redevelopment. Virginia Ryan Park, which has just had a whole lot of planting done, as well as a brand new nature-based play area being installed, which does muddy the distinctions of where the play space ends and starts. So I really hope that we can achieve what we're after here in terms of separating dogs and people through signage, through education, and I think that it's going to be a bit of watch this space to see if we can maintain these parks as open, green spaces without fences around them and separating them. And I'd like to trust our citizens and know that by dropping the 5 metre exclusion zone around the playgrounds, I really think that we have talked to some of those respondents who opposed the policy as advertised. In fact, I think a majority of people would be pleased that and come out of that 77% opposed bracket now that playgrounds, where the sand is, where the swings are, where the play equipment is not for dogs, but the rest of you can have your dog right up to next to you while you're with your family. So I am not going to support this amendment, but I can see that there are some very tricky playgrounds in there that will definitely need some careful attention.
Thank you, Councillor Slaughter. Councillor Clark.
Thank you. Yeah, look, kids come to parks to play, and they should be safe in the park, and the park should be clean of anything to do with dogs. I'm very happy that we did drop the 5 metre exclusion zone. It's just not a practical way for people who do have a child and a dog to function while they're in the park. Most of our parks where the dogs are allowed off lead are larger spaces. So at the end of the day, owners have to take responsibility for their dogs. So that it's always the minority that let down the majority. I completely understand where you're coming from on this amendment in looking at these parks, and I'm looking at things. I'm looking at it from the view of we've just made Horry Long amazing. That park has just been completed. It's amazing, but to put a fence around that would be enormous. It would be a huge fence. It would be a huge cost to us as a community. While I understand you would want to do it to make sure it's clean and the kids are safe, but at the same time, I also just wanted to ask, could we look at, if we were willing to look at funding for fencing, why aren't we looking at funding for more rangers to go and hold those irresponsible people to account?
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Sullivan.
Yeah, thank you. And someone said earlier, I think it was you, dog issues are always going to be controversial. Get used to it if you want to become a councillor. I've got to say, this is the least passionate dog debate that I've witnessed in my 23 years. I would have expected in the olden days there would have been 200 or 300 people here and a couple of hundred people in the middle and quite a few dogs as well. I suspect because this has been a really thorough, considered process with a lot of engagement, that we've probably got it about right. It's never going to be perfect because it's a dog issue. I also wanted to touch on the issue of the sort of social, if I can call it social engineering. I'm not really sure what we call it these days, but I actually have a lot of sympathy for those people that have come and said, we need to encourage humans to interact with other humans and interact with their pets and let kids, find that opportunity to be in contact with wildlife and with pets and with nature and all sorts of things. There was a time when when I was a kid, the idea of a leash and a dog, the leash was kind of like, only occasionally when you went near a main road, maybe you'd put your dog on a leash, but basically the dogs took themselves for a walk. And guess what? The kids took themselves to the playground. They didn't have the parents with them. We've changed in 1 or 2 generations from being everybody has to be responsible for their kid, their dog, their this, their that. And we've got ourselves into a society where, all of these rule-based things are present. But I don't think that necessarily means, I don't particularly like it either that we're in that situation. But I don't think that you can assume that it's reasonable to force interaction on people that haven't necessarily invited it. And so a playground is where you take kids to play. I don't think that just because a dog is friendly, it might be a completely lovable dog, and maybe the owner is as well, maybe not, I don't know. That doesn't mean that the interaction should just be automatic. And I've seen it time and time again where, just walking along the street, the dog, not on the lead probably, or whatever, bounding up to a kid, and the kid absolutely cacks their kegs, right? And the owner's going, oh, that's fine, the dog's, friendly, and the parents running around going, what the hell am I meant to do? And the kid's screaming and crying, and the owner's going, no, it's really good, you play with my dog, let it lick your face. And it's nice in one respect, but it's also not how society is today. And I get that maybe that does need to change, but I don't think we should be in the position as sort of forcing people who are primarily there to take their kids for play to be in a position where they are confronted by that. And I also agree, the reality is if we want these sort of things to change, then owners are going to need to be far more responsible and train their dogs and make sure they are capable of recall and the like. I also don't agree that we need to fence every playground. I mean, as was stated, we don't fence the separation between the beaches. I mean, we have a beach in North Fremantle, literally, where you just simply have a line, and it's not even all that well mapped. And that's for the dogs, and that's the section that's not. And yeah, there's a bit of blurring that goes on, but what people do is they know the rules, there's consistency, they know where things are, and someone will go, oh, actually, you can't have your dog in this bit. And there's a lot of self-policing that's going on. But what's really important about that is consistency. And so people need to know where those lines are. And that we've, had that issue at South Beach, and there is a lot of signage, probably a little bit too much signage for those people that don't like the visual pollution. But the reality is, it's been improved, and people do know the difference between where they can take their dogs and they can't. And so then having, every second playground either being a dog can be in there, dog can't be in there. Across the board, we are seeing local governments in many areas, including our surrounding areas, basically doing exactly the same thing. And so we need that consistency to be able to say, yes, playgrounds are off bounds for dogs. That consistency is really important, because if we don't have that, it's going to be a lot harder for us to provide education to the community and the like. And I don't think, there's almost a sense of, there's a couple of $1 million, probably $3 million there just to put the fences around every one of those playgrounds. I think that's, to be honest, that feels like kind of like gun to the head, can't do it. That's not the reality. We do not need the fences around those playgrounds. What we need is people to take charge of their responsibility when they take their dog anywhere. So, look, I'm sorry I've gone on. The reality is can't support this,
Any other comments on the proposed amendment? Seeing now, I'll just briefly close on this. I just want to reiterate, over 3/4 of the people in the survey, whether they were dog owners or not dog owners, wanted either no change to the areas, or some areas on lead, or some areas dog prohibited, not every area. So that was 3/4. So that was the feedback that we received. Every single area that's listed here is an existing dog exercise area. Just to reiterate that, it's not adding anything or remove, or it's proposing not to remove other things. And I get that playgrounds are different. That's where kids go to play. But some of these playgrounds, you actually have to go through the park to get there. So if people are worried about dogs, they're going to encounter dogs on their way to the playground and on the way back as well. So that's also something. And for me, I hope that people are good and do the right thing. But as it was mentioned tonight, there is a minority of people out there that make us think that we need to do things that maybe we don't need to do, and because they are not responsible. So in adopting this policy, I believe we will get to a place where some of these parks, maybe all of them, maybe not all of them, the only way for us to have enforcement of the policy will be to put some barriers around the playground, because there'll be too many complaints, too many dogs running through it, because they're in the middle of dog exercise areas. One of these parks has a dog water bowl right next to the playground, a dog water bowl, existing infrastructure. So dogs are going to go there to get a drink, and there's going to be kids playing right next to them. So, and another one of these parks, the play equipment is 2/3 of the park, and it's not a big park. So we're creating a situation where there will be complaints, as someone brought up. If prohibiting dogs from an area will create conflict, and we're going to be left trying to solve that conflict. And that conflict, as part of this policy, as going to be adopted, as I can kind of read the room a little bit, will be we're going to be left with the responsibility to enforce that policy, which will be creating a barrier between the playground and the rest of the park. Now, I don't want to see fences go up around all these. I don't want to see fences go up around any of them. So I hope everyone does the right thing. But, I think that everyone agrees we need some spaces that are dog-free for kids to play. No one argues that we don't. And we do. We have those spaces. But what we're not going to have after this is a space where people can coexist and mingle any longer, as they have been doing largely successfully, I would argue. 98, 99% of the interactions between dogs and kids and people in these parks are positive. We don't have that data, but the vast majority of those interactions are positive. So again, I can kind of see how this is going to go, but we're still going to put it up for a vote anyways. And I want to thank you for allowing me to have a little say. So, all right. All those in favor of the amendment as put before us? That's Mayor Lawver. All of those against? Everybody else? So that amendment is not carried. So now we are back to the item as previously amended a couple times. And yeah, we're back to the item. Any further comments? Councillor Williamson-Wong.
Thanks. I think the one thing that I have forgotten to say this evening is that I wanted to thank the staff for their work on this policy. We know that it hasn't been easy and that a lot of work has gone into the community engagement and understanding how people expect to be able to mix with dogs in Fremantle. And so thank you to the staff for bringing it to us largely in a place that was acceptable by us, with some tweaks and some interesting discussions along the way.
Thank you, Councillor Williamson-Wong. Councillor Clark.
Yeah, I also just wanted to reiterate what Councillor Williamson-Wong just said and thank the staff for all the work on this. This was a big subject, a big emotive subject in some corners. I also wanted to thank the crew in North Fremantle who invited me to come and speak with them, and they're the people belonging to Watson and Loki and others who were there as well. So thank you for a really meaningful and respectful discussion, and it was also very amusing at times as well to be sitting discussing with the map out the dog policy, and to suddenly turn and actually there's a dog sitting on the chair next to you at some points in that discussion. So thanks everybody.
Seeing no further comment on the item as amended, Councillor Moughlin, did you wish to close? No. Okay, we'll put this up for a vote. All those in favor? And that's carried unanimously. Great. Okay, we're just after 8 o'clock, everybody. So I'm going to go through the next two items and see if people wanted to speak on either item 11 or item 12. That's the seasonal temporary trading or the youth strategy progress update.
Yes, I'd like to speak to 11, please.
Great. Then we'll go with item 11. Can I ask someone to move item 11?
You can push the M1, Ryan.
Yep. Oh. Councillor Williamson-Wong moved, seconded by Councillor Slaughter. Great. We should.
Thanks. Look, I think it's important to speak to the policy for two reasons. I'm going to start with the first one, which is to say thanks to the staff for including the ability for anyone in our community who would like to be a seasonal trader to propose a location within the city as an option for them to perhaps trade. I think it's an important part of our policy. We've obviously, well, not we've, the staff, I have not done the research on this. The staff have done a lot of research into understanding where seasonal and temporary trading might work in our city, which has led to the sites that are endorsed in the policy. But I do think it's important that there's a level of flexibility to allow for opportunities to arise. Particularly, I think it could be a useful tool in terms of vacancy within our CBD or elsewhere in how we might activate the streetscape or public land that surrounds, or city free land that surrounds those spaces with some seasonal trading opportunities, noting that we need to make sure there's a clear balance between the bricks and mortar businesses that put a lot of, financial investment into having a but fully, I guess, fledged and brick and mortar business in comparison to those who might be starting or seasonal traders. So I wanted to thank staff for that. I'm excited to see that in there and in the guidelines. The second is the kind of introduction of the three different time slots within seasonal trading. And I appreciate that we've had some comments shared from traders about the potential impact of those three different time slots. And I have questioned and brought this up with staff, the concern that perhaps having three different trading slots, being morning, lunch and an evening, would make it potentially unviable for a business to be there for a shorter amount of time, or perhaps doesn't suit some locations. However, on balance, and having considered that those three time slots don't have to necessarily go to three different businesses. One business may apply and obtain two time slots for that season, or perhaps there are opportunities to be flexible in the sharing of that time slot, which is to be worked out by applicants or by a joint application for perhaps the lunch slot, which might be the crossover period between two people who currently use that space, or otherwise. Makes me feel that there are a lot of spaces that may benefit from having the three different options, and that where traders currently operate from morning to midday, and then you have the kind of evening slot, there are opportunities for us to make sure that that balance is afforded through the policy. And I guess finally, it's, I think, important to acknowledge that the sauna locations will be coming out of the seasonal and temporary trading council policy. We all, I think, as a community collectively really enjoy the saunas being in the beach locations, particularly South Beach. However, we know that there have been concerns about that location in the past, and we've been through the whole, enforcement of us, I guess, allowing the sauna to operate there through the seasonal and temporary trading council policy to then have to have a break, etc. And moving to a longer term model, I think, is important, not just so that we can actually keep having our seasonal trading policy work properly, but also hopefully address some of the concerns around the generator that's used for power on that site at the moment and the other potential energy constraints. So yes, the summary is that I am on balance happy with the policy as proposed and happy to accept the officer's recommendation this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Williamson-Wong. Councillor Clark.
Thank you. I really welcome this initiative and all the work that the city officers have done on this policy. While there are people already operating in this way, and that is their business, there's a whole pile more people who are dreaming of businesses and thinking, I'd really love to give that a go or have a side hustle or do those sorts of things. And this policy will allow them to be able to do that, to try something out, to give it a go, to test locations, to see what works. And that's across hospitality, retail, or services. They can come and give it a go, and I'm really, really happy for that. If there are people out there who want to give business a go, let Freo be that place for them to be able to do that. Flexibility is going to be required on some of the timings and things. It's going to be a test it and see it and let's review it. We're going to have to make sure that there's no clash with the existing businesses in the area, and that those who are paying big rents and costs to be in a brick and mortar location aren't clashing with those sorts of things. But I don't really see that being a problem. The policy is also supported by the Fremantle Chamber of Commerce. Thanks to CEO Chrissy Moz for her comments on this and support for it. And I just think that this policy is one of those where everybody can win. So the community is going to win. They're going to get extra services or extra experiences, and we'll get extra income for the city, and we'll also have a way for succession planning, and hopefully some of those people who want to give it a try will be able to move into more permanent locations within the city's more empty buildings, and that would be the greatest outcome that we could have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Any further comments? Seeing none, we'll put the officer's recommendation up for a vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Great, thank you. Item 12, the Youth Strategy Progress Update. Would someone care to move that? Councillor Graham, seconded by Councillor Clark. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll put that up for a vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Right, now we're on to item 13, which is the Elected Member Council Policy Review. There is an amendment from Councillor Sullivan, and there's a proposed amendment by officers. So if I could just ask someone to move the item as with the officer's amendment. Councillor Sullivan, seconded by Councillor Clark. Okay, and now we're on to item 13, as proposed to be amended by the officers. Did you wish to make any opening comments, Councillor Sullivan?
I might just move straight to my amendment, if I could.
Right. And seconded
Page
by
8, I'll move that way.
Councillor Van Dorsen. So now we're straight into Councillor Sullivan's proposed amendment.
Thanks. Yeah, just a very simple one in terms of elected members attending committee meetings where they're not actually a committee member. In my experience, it's really important that a number of things are possible. One of them is that those members be able to speak and ask questions in exactly the same way as a committee member can. And the reason I believe that is that the experience is that there will always be one or two items on a committee agenda that a councillor might be very passionate about or might have a lot of community input about that they wish to come and represent onto that committee. And they really need to be given a sort of an equal footing in doing that. And of course, some of those items might be decisions that get made on the night by delegated authority. And so that really provides a fair opportunity for good representation to occur. I also feel, I wasn't going to sort of harp on this that much, but I do actually feel that in the situation where an elected member is in the room, they shouldn't be sitting at the back of the gallery. They should be sitting at the table, not with the committee members, but certainly at the table. And so that everyone can be clear that there is another councillor in the room, there is an observer, and the public can be clear about that. And this, it just makes the running of the meeting a lot better. And it is a very strange thing when a member of the public stands at the podium up there and asks questions of the council when they're a councillor. It's not a good look. It has happened from time to time where certain elected members feel that they're still part of the community, and of course we all are still part of the community, but once we get called a councillor or mayor, I think we have a different role to play, and that needs to be clear. And obviously the rest of it is really about just being recorded that you're at the meeting, and the same rules essentially should apply. You get recorded. If you've got an interest as well, it should be declared, and that should be recorded as well. Even though you're not a decision maker, the fact that you might have an interest, and if you were a decision maker and you'd be kicked out and not in the room, that should still be the case if you're not a decision maker and you just happen to be there. So it's really about just clarifying those things. I think this is good policy to do it this way.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. Any comments on the amendment? Okay, seeing none, we'll put that up for a vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Now we're back to the item as amended. Any comments? Councillor Slaughter.
Thank you. I had a question in regards to advice from the Department of Local Government Industry Regulation and Safety that came through late this afternoon, noting that with the reforms to standardised meeting procedures regulations, they are still progressing, and that change is anticipated to be implemented within the next year. Has that been taken into account in these documents, in particular in relation to meeting procedures?
Thanks, through the chair. Yes, that has been done. We actually did review this policy when we made the changes to the council meeting structure. We chose not to make any further changes because of the reform that was coming through. We're still waiting on that. We are waiting on what those changes might look like through the reform process. So at the moment, this is we haven't made any further changes to our meeting procedures, and so we've kept them as is.
Great, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, we'll put the item as amended up for a vote. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously. Oh, excuse me, my cold medicine is starting to wear off, everyone. Now on to statutory reports. Does anyone wish to speak on item 14, 15, or 16? Okay, seeing none, can I ask someone to move those three items en bloc? Councillor Graham, seconded by Councillor Clark. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. All right, now we'll read through the next set of items, the committee and working group reports. If someone wishes to speak on any of these items, I'll pull that out from being considered en bloc. We'll start with number 17, which is the working group information report. Nope. Number 1. The risk roadmap information report. No. Item 2? No? Oh, wait, did you wish to speak on item 2, Councillor Graham?
Just thought, why don't you ask who wants to speak?
Yeah,
on
that's
what
actually a
item?
much better way. Yeah. Does
Yeah,
anyone
yeah,
wish to speak
we're
on
going
any
through,
of the
through.
items between item 17 and item from Eric 13? 1 through 13.
Assume I've got my light on, Mr Mayor. I'll
Yep.
put down number 13.
Number 13. All right, we'll pull that out. Does anyone wish to speak on any of those other items? Councillor Mofflin.
Yeah, I'll just do 7. Thank you.
Item 13?
7.
Oh, 7, sorry.
Yep.
Great. Any other items people wish to speak on? Then I would ask someone to move all those items with the exception of items 7 and 13 en bloc. That's Councillor Kamada, seconded by Councillor Clark. All those in favor? It's carried unanimously. So now we will go to item 7, which is the financial audit results. Local government, moved by Councillor Mofflin, seconded by Councillor Slaughter. Okay, Councillor Mofflin.
Thank you. Yeah, very briefly, for those who weren't part of the Audit and Risk Committee meeting the other night, it was our, I only want to speak to this to say that it was our second meeting that was done in the public gallery, with, if you like, same setting as this one here, rather than being in a confidential setting. And it was a very successful meeting and good discussion. So if you have the opportunity to look back on the video of that to take in the discussion, that would be great. But also just to flag again and formally tabled as part of that meeting the outcomes from the OAG's local government financial audit results, which gave that pat on the back to the City of Fremantle for being one of the top 10 Tier 1 and 2 local governments in our audit results and our participation in those audits. And one of the requests that I made to staff at that time was when the OAG does provide similar kind of reports on the sector more generally, to bring them all back to council, not just those ones that give us the pat on the back, and share any of those learnings and recommendations for council.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Mofflin. Well said. Any other comments? And seeing none, we'll put the item up for a vote. All those in favor? That's carried unanimously. And now on to item 13. We moved by Councillor Graham, seconded by Councillor Slaughter. Councillor Graham, did you wish to?
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. I wasn't going to say anything tonight, but we actually had the meeting of this today at East Fremantle, so that's the reason I thought I'd just bring up a couple of things. And I'm chairing that meeting, and Councillor Kamada is the other Fremantle rep. It's usually a room of about 20 people, ranging from St John's to DFEST to the police. So it's might look and sound a bit boring, but it is one of the most interesting meetings that you can go to. And today, give kudos to the town of East Fremantle and the City of Fremantle. They both tabled their recovery plans under the local emergency management arrangements. So they've been endorsed by this committee. The terms of reference of the committee were updated and endorsed as well. So these things will filter back to council eventually, perhaps at the next 6 months review, I don't know. But, you know, the discussion is, you know, ranging from hospital ramping to the H5 bird flu. And you might think, well, what's all that got to do with emergency management? But these are the things that that are spoken to by the representatives from these areas. And we also had a very good update from the Fremantle Bridge Alliance. It's not for me to give out any secrets as to when the bridge may open, but things are moving along very well there, I might add, Mr Mayor, and everyone was very happy in the room, and I'll just leave it at that. And the Department of DFEST, Department of Emergency Fire and Emergency Services, did a desktop exercise today, and I'll just briefly go through. It was on the Maddington lithium ion fire in April. And would you believe those lithium batteries are still smouldering away in a tip, some which I won't disclose, covered in sand. That's how bad these lithium fire batteries are. And it was just the most amazing thing. And it's, you know,
the DFS have said that he said it's cost it's upwards of $8 million so far just to go through this whole process. So these are the sort of things that potentially, and then they discussed how it may happen in Fremantle and East Fremantle, and pray to God that it never does, of course. But if it does, you can be assured that at least the local emergency management teams are well prepared.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Graham. Any other further comments? Seeing none, we'll put the item for a vote. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously. And then now on to last agenda item, motion from which previous notice has been given. Councillor Williamson Wong. Moved by Councillor Williamson Wong, seconded by Councillor Clark. Councillor Williamson Wong.
Thank you. Look, this feels a little bit like making official what already happens, but as we know, the city is a landlord of sorts, and we have a number of commercial properties that are leased out in accordance with our commercial plan, and the request from this notice of motion is to investigate a new action within that commercial plan, which will formalise a process for the short-term activation of commercial properties that have been sitting vacant for a period of, for a longer period of time. So if a suitable long-term tenant is not identified within 3 months of an EOI closing or during, and I'll get to an amendment in a moment, or during the EOI process, that we would have an action that ensures those spaces are then allowed to be activated on a short-term basis. We, as a city, understand that there are a number of people who are looking for spaces for short-term opportunities that range from commercial, being retail, to hospitality or art studios, music studios and the like, people who are looking for spaces. And this, the kind of opening up of city spaces to short-term activation is not new. It's something that happens already through the commercial team, but this would just make sure that it does happen every time. And as detailed in the report, and as we spoke about in our briefing, hopefully in some ways this action is never used if the report comes back and we get to endorse it, but that would be getting ahead of myself. The main thing here is just to say that I hope you'll support that the new action for the commercial plan can be investigated for inclusion to ensure that we have activation of as many properties in our city centre as possible. We know that vacancy is an issue that extends mostly in the private ownership of buildings within our city centre, and I think it's our responsibility to control what we can control and have actions in place for those. But I'm happy to take questions on it. But before I do that, I will move my amendment, please, which is to clarify some language, which should hopefully
yes,
be brought on the screen.
Yeah, I was just going to say,
moved
if
as
the
amended.
seconder is fine with, I'm happy to take that as a minor amendment.
Fantastic, thank
Great.
you. And during the EOI process, just to ensure that when the report comes back to us, it has considered both options for short-term activation within 3 months of an EOI closing, and perhaps it would be open during that EOI process, because we know that they're sometimes extensive, that we could have some tenants in there. But yes, happy to take questions on this if other elected members have concerns.
Thank you, Councillor Williamson Wong. I'm happy that this is brought before us, because I think this is actually really wonderful. So thank you. As most folks know, I'm not a huge fan of asking others to do things that us as a city we're not willing to do ourselves. And so hopefully what this, like you said, would do is kind of bring out to the public a little bit our current practice, but also hopefully extend it in a way that, so that way if we do have empty commercial spaces, we're doing everything we can as a city to make sure that they're activated while they're sitting there vacant. So thank you for bringing this forward, and look forward to supporting this and having it come back to us. Any other comments? Councillor Moughlin.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm happy to support this, although in having said that, like, I don't, to Councillor Williamson Wong's point, I don't think it's actually a huge issue in terms of city managed property and there being large lots of city land that, or property that's sitting vacant and that's not being activated. And I do know that officers work very hard to ensure, particularly those commercial properties that we have, being letted and bringing a return to the ratepayers of the City of Fremantle and ensuring that we are managing those appropriately. I'm sure it'll get managed as part of the report process, but I was a little confused about the or and the and how that all fitted together. I'm assuming you're just saying if we've got a vacant building that's going out for an EOI process, consider what we might be able to do as part of that. Okay. Yep. Cool. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moughlin. Councillor Clark?
Yeah, thank you. In agreeing with what Mayor Lorver said, we've got to be what we want to see, and if there's vacant buildings and they can be filled temporarily, that's great. But also, I feel this will bring more transparency too to the process, in that, you know, when people see the windows covered up, they think nothing's happening, and perhaps our city business team have been negotiating with 3 or 4 different parties, and none of that has come together for whatever reason. It's not that nothing is happening, but it does look like that from the outside. And though we have had some vacancies, there are some tenants coming in soon, which is very exciting, and I'm looking forward to that. So I feel this is just going to provide more transparency, as well as encouragement for other private landlords who like to leave their properties empty for extremely long periods of unnecessary time.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Any other comments? Seeing none, did you wish to close on your item, Councillor Williamson-Wong? No? All right, then we'll put this up for a vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Wonderful. Thank you, everybody. Urgent business, we have none. Late items, none. There's no confidential business. And with all that being said, everyone, I declare the meeting closed at 8:34 p.m. Thank you for all of your work.